Okay, so this is a quick tutorial in Blender. It's going to be really fast. You need a working computer, internet, and a mouse. So you go onto blender.org to download your Blender software. Blender is free and doesn't need to be paid for. With the help of your guardian or your friends or your parents, you download Blender, install it. I've already installed Blender, so I don't need to install it again. So you install Blender. Once that is installed, you then open the Blender software. Once you have that opened, then we can start modeling the building you see on the left. The low poly design on the left is what we've been modeling for this tutorial. So you open up your Blender like so. You use your middle mouse button to zoom in and out, middle mouse shift to pan, and so you just navigate using your middle mouse button. Now we use the transform cursor and the squares to scale your object. So to create this, we break it down into shapes. So we have a cube that we scale up. We scale that in the XY dimensions and the Z dimensions. So 5, 5, 7. You press Shift A to create another cube, like so. We scale using the transform cursor, or as you can see, using the tab on the right hand side, the top right. So once we have this scaled, we place it to create our ground plane. Once we have our ground plane, we try to adjust it to fit the size of our building. So we move this, and once we have that, the next step is to create our roof. You use that to circle, you use the circles to rotate, you use the little boxes to scale, and you use the arrows to move, like so. So we move the cube right on top of our ground plane. We create another cube. In this case, I created a plane. I was supposed to create a cube. You create a cube for the roof. So you press Shift A, mesh, cube. Move that using the transform. Move it in position, then scale. And then we scale accordingly to fit our building. So once we have our roof on top of our building, then we could adjust it, then duplicate it to create the top and the bottom floor of our building. So you Shift D to duplicate. Using the transform, you move it downwards, and then we have our top floor and our second floor. So from here on, everything in Blender for this tutorial, what you need to learn is how to duplicate, transform, scale, and rotate. So we duplicate our roof, and then we move it accordingly. So we duplicate using Shift D, and we duplicate and we move accordingly. So once we have that in place, then we can take it and duplicate it as follows. So now that we have our roof and we have the demarcation for our building, the next step will be to create our windows. We use a mesh, cube. So do that is Shift A, mesh, then cube. We scale using the cursor, the little cube cursor, and then we rotate it using the circles or the curves, and then we place it right in front of our building using the transform. Now we move that accordingly, you adjust, and we scale it to fit our building. So once that is done, like I said, all you have to then do is duplicate the cube, the windows, to achieve what we have in our design. So we Shift D, we scale it down to create those glass in our windows. Once that is duplicated, we can then Shift select everything and duplicate it again. Shift D, select the two windows, duplicate it, Shift D again, and then we have our window. So to create the doors and the windows on the bottom floor, all we have to do is duplicate what we have for our windows, scale them accordingly, and adjust them. And then we have this little shade using the cube. We place that there. So the next step is then to create the bricks on the side of the building. It's very easy. You create cubes, place them on the side, duplicate them, and then we combine them. To create the trees, you create a cone using Shift A, cone, and a cylinder, and then we place them on the side of our building. So once we have all of our cubes, the next step is to combine all of our bricks. So we Shift select everything, Ctrl J to combine it. So it's one object instead of 10 different bricks, it's one brick. And once we have that, the next step is to light our scene. To light our scene, we go to render engine, change the cycles, then go on to colors. So we click on the rendering, shift the environment textures, and then we're going to download an HDR image. Now HDR images are just images to light up your scene. So click on HDRI hub hub.com, download your favorite HDRI, the licensing you'd like to use. Once that is downloaded, you unzip the file and you store it on your drive. Go back to Blender, go to open, then look for that HDMI image that we just downloaded. Once you've downloaded it, Harbor 3, you look for the file on your drive, select the JPEG, open the image, and once on the top right on our rendering icon, we can then see what the HDR looks like. So the image then lights up our scene. So you click on shading tab, so that is the icon next to the rendering tab. So we create materials to color our roof. So basically in CGI it's shading. So we click on the lights to shade our roof. We combine our roof together, Ctrl J, and then it's very easy from here on. So all we have to do is select every aspect of our building, and then we combine them. So in this case, the windows are gonna have a blue color based on our design. We shift select each object and we combine them using Ctrl J, as we did with the bricks. And so once we have that as one object, we can then create a new material. We create new base color, select the blue color that you want, and then use that to shade your windows. Now you can find more tutorials on YouTube. I'll put a link to the description to where you can learn more about Blender, because I know this tutorial is a little bit rushed. But once you have your building, use your materials to actually color your objects. So in modeling it's called shading. So we select the aspects of our building. So the main part of our building, we create a new material using the color wheel. We decide what color we want, and then we assign it to that object. So I've run along, created, shaded everything. And so once you have everything shaded and we have our light, the next step is to render. So in this case, I'm shading my trees, shading my windows, and polishing everything. So the doors. So to create a camera or to render, you Shift A, camera, press 0 on your numeric pad. Make sure you lock your camera, lock camera to view, and then render, and click render. So you can have, so as you can see, it renders your image, and then you can use this in your game design process, either in pre-production or in production, to tell and build worlds, tell your stories, and just kind of visualize what you're trying to, the problems you're trying to come up with for air pollution. So in this case, I created the building, I've created a street, a house, and I've created trees. Obviously, more trees means more oxygen. And so with modeling, you can actually render out your images to tell your stories and finish the game design process.